Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Cold Hard Truth podcast. I'm Jack Smith.
I'm Shrikar Gendern.
I'm Anish Gupta.
And I'm Cooper Barton.
So we have Cooper joining us from Cleveland Sports Center, one of the top Cleveland sports news pages on Instagram. Cooper, thanks for joining us today. Wanted to talk about who had the best draft by team in the National Football League. Who is your pick?
My pick was the Jacksonville Jaguars. I picked them because they had a very solid draft with 2 first-round picks.
Anish?
Yeah. So Jags was one of my kind of top 3 range. I kind of had them in there, especially with what they did with their 2 first-round picks. But I actually went with Minnesota. Now, I'm not going to list all 15 of their picks because they picked 15 times in 7 rounds, which is pretty insane. But I wanted to highlight 2 guys that I thought, or actually 3 that I thought were amazing guys. One was Justin Jefferson in pick 22, because when the Eagles were at 21, I think we all kind of, in our mock draft, we all kind of had them going with Justin Jefferson. But instead they went with Rager over there at 21. And while that's not a bad kind of pickup, I thought Justin Jefferson would be a perfect fit for them. And when I saw Minnesota on the clock, I mean, how can you pass up on a guy like that? So they took him easily at 22 here. I see a lot of Stephon Diggs' kind of play style in him. He's quick. He's elusive. And we saw him absolutely perform in the national championship. I believe he had 4 touchdowns in that game. So, I mean, we've seen he can play in that big kind of moment. And, I mean, Kirk Cousins has always been kind of that guy. Can he step up? I mean, you've got a playmaker here in Justin Jefferson who worked great alongside Adam Thielen. But one guy I actually liked this one more than the Jefferson pick. My favorite pick for them was Jeff Gladney at pick 31. I had him as my 3rd best corner in the draft. I believe he's 5'10", 5'11", but he plays a lot taller than that, as I've said many times. Coming out of TCU, this dude is an absolute dog, a great press corner, and you lost Alexander and Trey Waynes, obviously Xavier Rhodes, but I mean that dude could not stop a cold. Like, this dude was absolutely terrible. So you lose those 3 guys, but you kind of get a really good playmaker here in Jeff Gladney. I think he's going to work great in that secondary alongside Harrison Smith. Obviously, they've lost a lot of guys, including Sendejo, who came to us. Really like Sendejo's game, so that's kind of a big loss for them. But I think Gladney and Jefferson were 2 great selections. If we want to, another one that I also liked was Ezra Cleveland. Actually, the Browns were kind of thinking of trading back, maybe to select him later in the rounds, but the Vikings got him there as a steal, as left tackle for them. So, yeah, those were really good picks for me for Minnesota, and I just think that they, after losing Stephon Diggs, still getting a lot of capital for him, they were able to kind of solidify their roster despite, a bad cap struggle. What do you guys think?
Yeah, Jacksonville and Minnesota both had really good drafts, in my opinion. My pick here was the Arizona Cardinals, and I feel like a lot of the Cardinals offseason has been centered on how good the offense can be. They brought back Kenyon Drake, acquired DeAndre Hopkins, of course, and Kyler Murray, he's going to enter year 2 with plenty of firepower. But I feel like the defense was the big winner in day 1 of the draft, though. Isaiah Simmons, he's going to join the Cards. He's super elite athlete, did a little bit of everything for Clemson. And the Birds didn't have a pick in the 2nd round because it was the centerpiece of the deal that brought them Hopkins. So they spent their 3rd round selection on Josh Jones, who was a tackle getting 1st round hype throughout the pre-draft process. And if he comes anywhere near his ceiling, I mean, he's the steal of the 3rd round. The day 3 selections, they were largely spent just filling out the depth chart in the front 7. Eno Benjamin, I watched a bit of his highlights. He's an intriguing pass-catching back. He could find a role as a Drake backup. So overall, I think there's a lot to love about Arizona's performance.
Yeah, I mean, I can't argue with any of what you guys have touched on. Personally, I went with the Cowboys because they somehow, with only 1 pick in each round, other than the 4th round, got 3 first-round players, in my opinion. They got CeeDee Lamb at pick 17, which we've kind of talked about. We never thought would happen. They got Trevon Diggs, my 2nd corner on the board, at round 2, pick 19. And then they got Neville Gallimore, who I think is a first-round D tackle, at round 3, pick 18. And that's not mentioning Tyler Biadasz and Bradley and I, who I thought could be 2nd or 3rd round talents in the 4th and 5th round. So I think that the Cowboys, all around, only having 7 picks, got 5, top 2 round guys. Cooper, do you want to kind of touch on what you really liked in the Jaguars draft?
Well, at pick 9, the Jaguars went with CJ Henderson from Florida, and I really like this because I had him as number 2 behind Okudah, of course. But I think Henderson, they reached a little bit, but that's what they needed with trading Jalen Ramsey for 2 firsts last season. And then at 20, they went with Kalavian Chasen out of LSU. And I think that he can replace Yannick Ngakoue really well. And I think that he will fit into that defense perfectly and thrive. But my last guy I want to talk about, and I think the best pick out of this whole draft for the Jaguars, was Laviska Shenault. After Marquise Lee was cut in April, I didn't know what they were going to do during the draft, and Laviska Shenault, I think, will fill that role of Marquise Lee's spot in that offense perfectly.
So I got
Yeah.
a couple questions there, but so first off, Jack, I still don't see I don't see the Trevon, the 2 picks that they made. So we've kind of touched on it a lot, but Trevon, I don't see him as a first-round talent. While he is a second-round talent, in my opinion, I think that was a great pickup. But I still don't understand, Cooper, if you want to touch on this Shrikar as well, I'm still unsure, how does the CeeDee Lamb fit with kind of this whole Cowboys offense? Where do you see this team going in terms of their receiving core? Are they going to become a run-first team, pass-first team? They haven't established that identity. I still remember Dak's rookie year, they were a clear run-first team, right? Now they're kind of switching it on and off. And I think they need to establish a true identity here. And I think they should go back to being a run-first team with Ezekiel Elliott, despite their offensive line being not as part of what they've had the past few years.
So what I kind of see there is you've seen recently high-powered offenses run the NFL. And so the Cowboys are just trying to give Dak or the next quarterback in that system, which I think is a big possibility they move on from Dak, as many weapons as possible. So having Zeke in the run game, having a great offensive line, and now 3 tremendous receivers, all with the possibility to go above 1,000 yards, I think that's just a recipe for success. And you just can't pass up on CeeDee Lamb. He could be a top 5 talent in this draft class, and getting him at pick 17, you can't let him go past that just because of what could happen in the future. So it might not seem like a necessity this year. I guarantee that it will prove to be fruitful in the future.
So you think Gallup could get traded? Maybe even you think?
No. They're going to keep all 3.
I think they'll keep all 3.
Later.
You're forgetting that they lost Randall Cobb and Tavon Austin. So it makes
CeeDee
sense.
is a lot better than Randall Cobb.
Exactly.
Right? He has a
That's
lot
the
more
point.
But no. But see, how are you going to balance out 3 receivers, right? And I think Gallup does have that kind of potential to be a really good number 2. And I think if I'm the Cowboys, I think if now that you've taken CeeDee, I think you should see these first 8 games out and see maybe if Gallup, right? Because Gallup's showing potential, right? And he came into his own. I've kind of already said the stats, but 1,100 yards in 14 games along with 6 touchdowns is no joke. So I think, a lot of those passing yards that Dak had was a little bit in garbage time, but still, Michael Gallup was a key piece of that offense. And I think, what are your thoughts? If CeeDee and Amari are thriving, right, and Gallup is kind of that guy that's not getting those touches, and he's getting mad, what would you see the value for him maybe in a potential trade?
I would say around 5th round pick, because
5th round.
He's done 1 season of work so far. He's shown potential, like you said, but he isn't a high class receiver. Like Odell, 1st, 3rd, Jabril, and Zeitler, all for Vernon and Beckham. And then a 2nd round pick for DeAndre Hopkins, when DeAndre Hopkins is one of the top tier receivers in the game. So I say around a 5th round pick for him would probably seal the deal.
So for the Hopkins trade, though, do you think that kind of shattered the wide receiver market? Because Stephon Diggs was traded right after and they still got a 1st, 6th, and the 7th.
It's hard to tell because DeAndre Hopkins is getting older, but he hasn't lost any of his production, I should say. Well, Diggs is really young still. He's still producing at a high level. I'm not sure how to think about that, honestly.
I think the problem with Gallup in a trade is the upcoming need for a contract. So I think that you'll see them keep all 3 of these receivers, but I think Gallup will be the odd man out at the time his contract comes, whether that just means not re-signing him or trying to trade him a year before they're due to pay him. But I think that they needed to draft Lamb. And I mean, yes, you said that they have 2 receivers that did well last year, but how many wins did they have? So there's obviously something
But
that
see,
needs
that's my point. That's because they focused on the passing game a lot more than the running game. Because I think if you would just let Zeke run even more, like I agree, he did get his touches, and he still had a decent year. He wasn't able to produce to his rookie year potential yet. He still hasn't amassed that production. I mean, while he did kind of have that in his sophomore year, that 6-game suspension kind of derailed it. But I think they should go back to establishing Zeke more and more. And I know the Buckeye fandom is kind of coming out of me here, but still, I think while you have these weapons, I think it's easy. I mean, no matter who's under center, whether it's Dak or Dalton, I think if you get it, all starts with the running game because that opens up the passing game. Like you saw that against New England, right? They could not run the ball. They could not establish kind of their identity on offense, and that like Amari just got completely shut down. Even though he was playing one of the best corners in the game, it's just their offense wasn't able to flow. Like you've seen that countless times, even against Chicago in that Thursday night game. There are those times where it's just they're not able to click in the passing game, and the running game is the only way to open that up. So while they do have those 3 receivers, I think they shouldn't be afraid to kind of be a run-first team, much like the Steelers did with while they had those guys in Brown, Martavis Bryant, and Marcus Wheaton, who's kind of that on and off productive guy. They still had guys like Le'Veon Bell and D'Angelo Williams to kind of carry that load and open up the passing game overall.
Shrikar, you want to touch on that a bit?
Well, I mean, the thing is, like, we see this a lot, but like there comes a point when a team gets on the clock, and even though that there's a certain prospect that doesn't really fit a pressing need, I mean, he's too good to pass up. Like that seems simple, but I don't think like a lot of teams never grasp that sort of concept. So I mean, Dallas should be fortunate he made it to 17. I mean, I didn't think he was going to be there. And I mean, when you lose Randall Cobb and Tavon Austin, it makes not so much, but it makes sense to me. Even though you have other needs, the fact that CD fell all the way there, it still makes sense for them to grab him. And in what world is that a bad pick? That's just kind of what I'm.
Yeah, the way I look at it is Mike McCarthy coming in to be the coach. We've seen how the Packers played under Mike McCarthy when the quarterback had weapons. And then we saw what happened when they didn't, is when they picked in the top 10. So now he's coming to a team. Before they drafted CeeDee Lamb, could you guys name the Cowboys' third receiver?
Devin Smith?
Gallup.
So
Devin Smith is what I'm thinking of.
That's kind of my point. So they replaced – I think it is a bigger need than people thought. Maybe they didn't need a number 1 receiver to fill that number 3 spot, but it's just you can't complain when they do. So I think that Mike McCarthy now comes to a team where the entire offense is set, possibly except the quarterback, which they can change because Dak's still on the franchise tag, correct?
Yes, for 33
so
mil.
They could change that in a year, and a new quarterback will be coming in, maybe even a rookie, to a team that has 3 possible number 1 receivers, a top running back, and a great offensive line. So I see no problem with this pick.
So you think the Cowboys got better or worse overall? Because I think they got – in the draft, I think they got better. Like, I think they did.
I do.
But I want to say, like, can they overcome the losses in free agency with this draft? Because, Jack, you did allude to the Cowboys having the best. Do you think this was enough to overcome the losses that they had?
Without a doubt, yes. I think that Bradley and I can come in and replace Robert Quinn because I think that he's a heavily underrated pass rusher. I've watched him at Utah for a while. He has the production. I think he will be able to produce in the NFL pretty soon. Tyler Biadasz I had as one of my top interior offensive linemen. So getting him at the end of the 4th round was a steal, in my opinion, to replace Travis Frederick, who recently retired. Gallimore, maybe not a huge need, but he's a talent that was there in the 3rd round, and they kind of jumped on it to be able to play on the inside. And then both Trevon Diggs and CeeDee Lamb filled needs, in my opinion. Trevon Diggs can come in. I believe he's the number 1 corner, and I hope he proves me right in Dallas this year. But the way I look at it is the places where they got these players was so much farther below the value I thought that they had. So every single one of them was a steal, in my opinion. They picked Reggie Robinson and Ben DiNucci, two players I'm going to be completely honest I've never heard of before, so I didn't really want to touch on those. But the other 5 picks were all huge steals, which is why I just had to give the Cowboys the best draft.
So that's I can see where you're coming from based off that, but I just wanted to quickly touch up on a little bit more of the day 3 selections here. For example, with the Vikings, I thought this was one of the best 4th round picks. Troy Dye, the linebacker out of Oregon, I thought it was an absolute steal. I was kind of surprised that, I know, Cooper, you're a huge Browns fan like I am. Were you kind of surprised that we went, we didn't take Malik Harrison or Troy Dye, and I believe we went with Jordan Phillips out of
Jacob
LSU.
Phillips.
Sorry, Jacob Phillips. What are your thoughts on like that kind of pick? Do you like Troy Dye? What do you see with kind of the whole game, like how the linebacker? What were the linebackers in the draft that you kind of thought of? And obviously with your pick with Jacksonville kind of solidifying the front seven, what are your thoughts on how Jacksonville did it, and what are your thoughts on the Troy Dye pick by Minnesota?
Well, the Troy Dye pick, I had him as my number 3 linebacker behind Kenneth Murray and Patrick Queen, of course. But I really thought he was going to go day 2. But the fact that he fell in the 4th really, really surprised me.
Yeah.
And the fact that the Browns and the Ravens both passed up on him also was very surprising to me. But on the Jaguars, they also got Colin Johnson, a wide receiver from Texas. I was very high on him because of his size, 6'6", 225 pounds. He has a ton of potential to be a great red zone receiver. He has 31-inch arms, which also is a great size for a guy of his size. He has a great build, but he was limited to injury in 2019, which I think made him fall. But for a 6th-round pick, he has a ton of potential to become the number 3 receiver in Jacksonville.
Yeah, I've seen him play against USC a couple times. I mean, he makes every single catch. It seems like the ball is thrown his way. His catch radius is just insane. So I agree. With a 6th-round pick, definitely a good pick for the Jaguars. Shrikar, did you want to touch on the late-round picks for the Cardinals a little bit?
Yeah, as I said, Benjamin, I think he's going to be a great backup for Kenyon Drake. And kind of touching on Minnesota selecting like what they did in the 4th round. I mean, they took DJ Wonnum from South Carolina, and I thought that was a little bit of a reach, but then the Troy Dye pick, I think that made up for that, because I mean, his coverage abilities are insane, and I think that gives him a lot of upside to develop into an every down linebacker. He can just get more physical against the run. Overall, and I think the Vikings did well they had so many picks. So I think they did really good to fill the roster holes. Mm-hmm. And they're going to need a lot of them to contribute right away. So overall, I think the Vikings had a great draft.
Yeah, I mean, the way we look at it is a lot of teams with a pretty decent amount of picks filling both needs and also getting players a lot farther down on draft boards than we thought maybe they would. I think just all 4 of these teams had tremendous drafts. Some of the other ones I looked at were maybe the Ravens, but I just felt like not a whole ton of picks. They had a couple great ones, but not enough for me to give it to them. But I'm still going to stay with the Cowboys just because they were able to get 3 first-rounders with only having one pick in each of the first 3 rounds. Does anyone else want to kind of close out why they thought their team was the best?
I think the Jaguars were the best after losing a lot of defensive help this year with A.J. Bouye gone, Jalen Ramsey gone, and also Yannick Ngakoue sitting out.
Don't forget
so
Campbell
I think
too.
they really –
Campbell too, yeah.
What?
Campbell too, yeah.
Oh, yeah, he going to Baltimore. But C.J. Henderson replacing Jalen Ramsey, I think Jalen Ramsey and A.J. Bouye, I think is going to be phenomenal there. And K'Lavon Chaisson replacing Ngakoue will be perfect.
I think just to kind of finish it out here, I think with all these drafts that we were talking about with all these 4 teams, I think it's, like, for example, the Cowboys, I didn't like their free agency. The Vikings, again, I didn't like it as much. Obviously, they were in tough situations. All these teams were, especially with the Jaguars. But, like, for example, the Jaguars started young. They started switching over to younger players. They're starting to rebuild this team in the right direction, kind of like what the Dolphins were doing last year. And I really like the direction that they're going in, right? Jack, you alluded to the Cowboys were able to kind of fill the needs that they had while also getting good talents in those mid-rounds, right? And the Cardinals just haven't done anything wrong this entire free agent. Like, they've just been picking guys that are talented at positions that they already have while also filling some desperate needs that they've needed. And, now it's all on Kyler Murray and Cliff Kingsbury, right? Like, you've got all the talent in the world. You've got some defensive guys that can really help you there. Also having a receiver in DeAndre Hopkins and just a blockbuster deal, right? And, even a team like Minnesota, who we were kind of questioning, are they still second in the division? Can Chicago overtake them? I think through the draft, they kind of solidified themselves as easily a contender for the AFC North, while the Packers kind of slipped down. They kind of lost some of their stock here. I'm losing my stock in the Packers. So now, these divisions are up for grabs, like the NFC East. I mean, while the Cowboys got a little bit better, the Eagles didn't really solidify their lead in the division, right? The Jaguars can easily be a team that becomes formidable in a few years. So great drafts all around, and I think all of our picks here have reasons to be the best pick in the draft.
Yeah, so thank you so much, Cooper, for coming on. We're going to have a lot more stuff in the future with guests. Make sure you go check out his Instagram, Cleveland Sports Center, for all of the Cleveland sports news that you need. We're going to have him on an episode in the future. The next one you're going to see after this one, talking all about Cleveland's offseason and what he sees for the team in the future, just like a lot of other teams. So thank you guys for watching this one. Thanks, Cooper, for coming on, and we'll see you next time.